Tim Larson greeted each individual he encountered with a smile as he made his way through the crowd with his daughter Heather. He was the most proficient maintenance man in the company, spending the majority of his working hours in the factory repairing and maintaining the sophisticated equipment necessary for the production of buffers and accessories. The Ferguson family company employed over 400 individuals, and Tim was acquainted with nearly all of them. He held a positive regard for the majority of them. The Ferguson Summer Picnic was an eagerly awaited annual event, sponsored by Ferguson Manufacturing in recognition of the dedicated work of the event was typically held on the third Saturday of July and saw a high level of participation. A variety of complimentary food and beverages, along with family-oriented games, were consistently available. The festivities were held at a small amusement park rented by the company for the day. Children had the opportunity to enjoy rides, ice cream, sodas, and games. A large pool and even pony rides were available for children. Adults could participate in volleyball, horseshoes, and badminton, as well as enjoy refreshments and swim in the pool. "Heather, I apologize in advance," Tim said as he looked toward the small pavilion where Edgar Remington was holding a meeting. "If you would like, you can wait in the car." One may inquire as to the year in question. It is unreasonable to expect a child to witness or be exposed to the content of a conversation that is about to take place. "I would like to observe the situation firsthand." Tim's daughter replied, "My mother will eventually resolve this issue and make you appear to be the antagonist. I simply need to ensure that you perceive the reality of the situation accurately. I acknowledge that my mother has been somewhat challenging to interact with recently, but it is challenging to believe that she treated you in such a harsh manner." This was particularly evident in the open manner in which he was expressing himself. Tim acknowledged the likelihood of such an outcome by nodding grimly and heading towards the pavilion. Heather, on the other hand, separated from him and began to make her way to the rear of her mother. Edgar Remington was situated at the center of the pavilion, where he proceeded to deliver a speech that was both impassioned and forceful. He advocated for an increase in production and a reduction in costs. Tim, in turn, made his way through the crowd to join his wife. Tim proceeded to traverse the assemblage and draw near to his spouse, who was situated in the company of Edgar. She appeared to be following his every utterance. Tim observed Mrs. Agnes Ferguson, who was situated at a distance, sipping a soft drink and observing her husband's father, who had established the company 50 years prior. Her husband, William, had assumed control of the company 20 years ago and, during his tenure, had nearly doubled production as well as the profitability of the company. Unfortunately, William Ferguson suffered a severe cardiac event and passed away the previous winter at the age of 56. At the recommendation of his legal counsel and business advisors, Agnes Ferguson appointed Edgar Remington as the company's chief operating officer. He had previously served as a vice president at a Fortune 500 company. Tim began his career with Ferguson Buffers around the time William Ferguson assumed control of the company from his father. After graduating from high school, Tim commenced his professional journey with the company, which spanned over 2 decades. During this period, he cultivated a strong rapport with William Bill Ferguson and found himself deeply affected by Bill's absence. Tim nodded to Mrs. Ferguson before walking over to his wife, Mandy, and saying, "Would you join me on the picnic for a bit? We could have a drink and play volleyball. Son, we are talking business here. Why don't you go have a beer and throw horseshoes with your friends from the floor?" Remington snapped back. The term floor was used to describe the part of the company where the actual production work was done. People worked either in the office or on the floor. Those who worked in the office often treated those who worked on the floor as inferior employees. Describe the area of the company where the actual production work was carried out. Employees were either situated in the office or on the floor. Those who worked in the office often regarded those who worked on the floor as inferior employees. Tim replied calmly, attempting to maintain his composure. To avoid further confrontation, I stated that we were engaged in business matters. Remington then asked Tim, "Why don't you engage in some of the games with your colleagues?" Mandy interjected, expressing concern that her husband was about to clash with their superior. Edgar was discussing business proposals that I wished to hear, proposals that did not involve personnel costs. He added a harsh laugh and stated that she would not understand the theory behind his ideas. He then invited her to accompany him, but she declined. Tim warned Remington not to ask again, and Remington replied that he was staying there. Tim then asked why Remington did not simply go and have fun with the other employees on the floor. Mandy replied that Remington should leave, stating that they were engaged in a productive business discussion and did not require his presence. Those present on the floor were privy to the ensuing conversation. Remington insisted, with an evident chuckle, that Tim was indeed a complete ... Tim, standing and turning away from his wife, addressed Remington directly. "The next good idea you get, and it will be your first, will be your last," he warned. "You are the rudest individual I have ever had the misfortune to meet. You have really screwed this company up." Tim demanded that Remington provide an account of his previous utterance. Remington replied with a strained smile and proceeded to call Tim a rude bastard. Tim then proceeded to provide a more detailed account of the insults he had just heard and informed those present that he had publicly called the company's COO names. "You must be intoxicated," Remington replied, stating that Tim Larson was not in a receptive mood to accept his demeaning authority. "I will overlook this transgression out of respect for Mandy, but you are advised to depart before I reconsider my stance." "Have you consumed any alcohol tonight, Tim?" Tim responded in a subdued tone. "Now that this rationale is no longer applicable, I suggest you reconsider your decision and opt for the second option." "Is that what you desire?" "I would prefer to be dismissed from my position and removed from this establishment," Remington replied. "That is a possibility, in fact. However, you are unable to do so yourself. There is no security personnel present at this event, so you are on your own. You are a cowardly individual, Tim. I am certain that everyone in this room would enjoy seeing you attempt to remove me from this event, Tim. I am coming with you, Mandy. Please excuse Tim Edgar, who has been in a less than optimal mood of late. It is likely that his stress is a result of the recent discovery that he is responsible for half of the payments on your new house." Remington was merely teasing, as he will have to work overtime and forego leisure activities to fulfill his financial obligations. It is understandable that this situation would cause Timmy distress. "The only stress I am currently experiencing is the moment was sufficient to prevent Tim from lashing out." In response, Tim glared at Remington and replied, "I have an almost uncontrollable urge to beat the crap out of you, Remington." As Tim spoke, he clenched his hands into fists and took a step toward the company's co-owner. "How about you, Edgar? Feeling froggy?" "You're fire," T.I. Larson announced the retreating co-owner before slamming the back of his knees hit the chair, and he fell backwards. "What is the matter with you?" demanded Tim's wife, rushing to help Remington to his feet. "Do not bother coming home until you are ready to apologize to both Edgar and me," Tim replied, looking around at the crowd of spectators. He then nodded to a young man in Bermuda shorts and a New England Patriots t-shirt. Tim ISON turned away from his wife and Remington as he started walking toward the parking lot. He heard the young man inquire of Mandy whether she was Amanda Larson. Tim did not hear Mandy's response, but the young man's statement, "You have been served," elicited a sigh from the many viewers watching the destruction of his marriage. When Tim reached his truck, he began searching for his keys as he pulled. Heather called out to him from a distance, "Dad, I have to stay with Mom." Tim replied, "It sounds like you were prepared for any eventuality. Did you ask one of your friends to bring your pickup truck so you wouldn't have to drive home with Mom?" Tim then proceeded to explain the circumstances surrounding his wife's decision to purchase a new house and request that he contribute to the mortgage payments. He revealed that he had suspected Remington was the driving force behind this decision. He has now confirmed that she is not the woman he married years ago and certainly not the woman he would marry today. He feels that nothing he does is good enough for her. She is pushing him to either work more overtime or find a better job. He makes enough money, especially considering his wife's income. He is not willing to spend the best years of his life submitting to a boss like Remington or a colleague like Heather. Stated that it seemed as though Heather had already made up her mind. She then added, in her usual calm and collected manner, that she understood Remington had no respect for Heather and that her mother also showed no respect for Heather. She stated that Heather did not require such a person in her life. Heather thanked her for her support. She informed Heather that she had a place to live and that she would be starting her new job the following week. She stated that she would provide an update to Heather once she had settled into her new position. Tim had promised that Heather's mother would probably require her support. Heather concurred that emotional support would be forthcoming over the following days. Connie Dawson and Margie Olson attempted to provide solace. It was distressing to witness the events of the day, but it was beneficial to be present and observe the treatment of Heather's mother and the individual in question. It is likely that Heather's mother will not alter her narrative regarding the incident. At the very least, she will not do so in Heather's presence. Heather was intending to physically assault Remington, who, as Tim replied with a smirk, climbing into his pickup truck. Fortunately, this did not come to fruition. Mandy spent the half hour after the divorce papers were served in the ladies' room, crying. Heather remained close by but did not display the sympathy that her mother felt was necessary in this tense situation. Heather accompanied her to in the parking lot. Mandy attempted to smile at every person she encountered, despite the likelihood that many were deriving pleasure from her distress. Once Mandy and Heather were safely on the highway, she expressed her disdain for her father's actions. She asserted that he would likely face consequences, including joblessness and housing insecurity, as a result of his misguided pride. She further noted that he could have potentially earned a more lucrative income had he exercised a different approach. If he had genuine pride, he would engage in activities such as golf and fishing, attend all of my softball and basketball games, participate in all school events, and contribute financially. In fact, he is regarded as the best father in the world by all of my friends. Why did you abandon us to listen to this airbag brag about he is a highly intelligent individual, my immediate superior, and the individual who requested my presence at an impromptu meeting with colleagues from my department? As the head of marketing, I was obliged to attend. The meeting was engaging until your father's unprofessional behavior marred the proceedings. It is widely acknowledged that business should not be conducted at a company picnic. He was exploiting the time of an employee who had come to relax and enjoy themselves. It appears that you have been listening to your father's advice to a great extent. Mandy expressed her discontent, stating that you are too young to fully comprehend the intricacies of finance. Those engaged in this field must exert considerable effort to achieve success. However, your father does not exemplify the characteristics of a dedicated worker. He tends to adopt a more passive approach. Heath observed that Mandy appeared to be adopting the same approach as the Remington individual, prioritizing immediate enjoyment and avoiding concerns about the future. This seemed to align with the advice that Remington had previously provided to her father. Heather then inquired whether this was a mere coincidence. Mandy responded in the negative, indicating that the broader office was aware of her father's reluctance to work overtime. Given the opportunity, he could have earned significantly more money, allowing his family to reside in a larger, more luxurious home with a swimming pool. How did Mr. Remington become aware of the proposal for Dad to assume half of the mortgage payments for the new house? Heather inquired. Mandy regarded her daughter before responding. We may have discussed it. At some point, I do not recall the exact moment, but I frequently reflect on the incident, so I may have requested that he speak up. Mr. Remington is a financial expert, yet he failed to exercise discretion by disclosing personal information in a public setting. He demonstrated a distinct lack of respect for my father today. Heather insisted that perhaps your father did not engage in the activity in question. Anything to earn his respect, Mandy immediately replied. Mr. Remington is a responsible man and does not respect anyone who is lax in their duties. However, he appeared to gain his father's respect when he began striking him with clenched fists. He retreated so rapidly that he fell back into his chair, which was rather absurd. It was not amusing. Your father was out of control, and Mr. Remington was attempting to prevent an unpleasant scene, which is within the scope of responsibilities of a man in his position. Mandy defended her boss. If he did not want an unpleasant scene, he should not have annoyed his father in the manner he did. Heather observed that he was attempting to humiliate your husband. Furthermore, you acquiesced to this course of action. I commend your father for asserting himself in the face of adversity. Your boss was on the brink of a severe physical altercation. Perhaps Edgar is in relatively good shape, having invested considerable time in physical conditioning. It was fortuitous that Edgar withdrew from the confrontation. Mandy inquired about the circumstances surrounding the delivery of divorce papers. Such that I would be humiliated as much as possible. Your father planned the entire scenario. It requires time to draft the necessary documents and identify an appropriate individual to serve them. Mandy reasoned that this was true, and her daughter concurred. It is evident that your father had to consider the matter for an extended period to secure suitable accommodation and employment. It is reasonable to assume that this process required a significant investment of time. Heather's mother observed that her husband had already secured new employment and accommodation. She expressed skepticism about his sincerity in pursuing a divorce. Heather responded with skepticism of her own, noting that her father's animosity towards Remington and apparent disdain for her seemed to indicate a lack of genuine interest in reconciling. She further suggested that his discontent stemmed from her desire to expand the family's living space. He expected my father to pay his share of the cost of a larger family home, which seems both childish and irresponsible. I am not attempting to defend my father, but it does seem that he was not particularly keen on the idea of a larger house. I have always been content with our current accommodation. I appreciate the proximity to educational and retail facilities. The decision was yours. We should consider relocating to a larger residence with the understanding that my father would be responsible for the majority of the expenses. Do you believe he would be amenable to such a proposal? You seem to possess a rather naive understanding of financial matters and interpersonal dynamics. Her concerned mother replied, "We are held in high regard within our social circle, at least I am." She continued, "It is crucial that we maintain a certain level of prestige. The fact that I earn twice as much as your father does not entitle me to assume the financial responsibility of the household while he engages in leisure activities such as golf and fishing. I am perplexed by this expectation. Is it not the case that your father never expresses discontent about the purchases you make? I have accompanied you on numerous shopping trips, so I am aware of your spending habits. How much one can spend in a day?" Mandy inquired. "I am merely curious as to why you believe Daddy should be prohibited from pursuing his personal interests. Is it perhaps because I am the primary financial provider for our family? Many of my friends have mothers who are not employed outside the home," Mandy continued. "These women engage in leisure activities such as shopping, massages, and golf without generating any income. Is this an equitable arrangement? Naturally, this is the case. They relinquished their careers to raise a family for their husbands." Mandy reasoned that husbands have a responsibility to maintain their wives' comfort. Heather had long ago learned that her mother could not be compelled to do something she strongly resisted. However, she could be gently guided. Ideas had to be planted. Given sufficient time and nurturing, Heather had planted the seeds, and it was now necessary to wait to see if they would fall on the rocks or blossom. "Remington, your boyfriend," Heather inquired suddenly. "You two seem very comfortable with each other." "Of course not, Edgar is a real bachelor. He dates all sorts of, he is not interested in beautiful women." "It sounds as if you are interested in him," Heather said. "I just hope you don't start dating him too soon. It will appear as though you had an affair with him while you were married to your father." "I have no romantic interest in Edgar or any other man," Mandy replied. "To be seeing anyone for a long time is contingent upon the dissolution of your father and my marriage. It is within the realm of possibility that he will repent and seek your forgiveness." Heather regarded her mother with a look of disbelief. "On what planet do you reside? You and Remington are. It is evident that there is a mutual interest between them. It is unlikely that he will apologize, as he did not do anything wrong. Publicly humiliating me is unacceptable." Mandy abruptly responded, "I do not understand how you can defend him. This drama must be challenging for you as well. In particular, I am referring to the incident where you..." Mandy declined her father's invitation to join the festivities, opting instead to remain at the residence and listen to Remington's monologue. This decision proved to be a source of embarrassment for Mandy. As she turned into her driveway, she observed that Tim's garage door was open. It was unusual for Tim to have room in his garage for his pickup truck, as it was often filled with an assortment of tools and equipment. Tim's garage was filled with numerous items, including a golf bag, 2 kayaks, camping and fishing gear, and a lawnmower. This was a stark contrast to Mandy's observation of the garage on Tim's side, which was devoid of any belongings except for a lawnmower and a few gardening tools. The garage on Tim's side was even swept clean. Mandy and her mother paused to survey the scene. Tim's departure was now manifesting itself in the most obvious way. Mandy inquired as to the quantity of furniture that Tim had taken. A cursory examination of the house revealed that, apart from the living room and bedroom sets, Tim had taken very little. Heather suggested that Tim might attempt to retrieve the remaining furniture. Mandy replied, "Let's see if he tries to go back and get the nice furniture." She added, "I think Dad has already taken everything he wants." Heather noted that Tim had never liked the furniture in the house. She cited the example of a chair that Tim's cousin had received as a gift. Mandy agreed, stating that the chair did not blend well with the existing furniture. Mandy explained that Tim had not complained when she gave him the chair. He had told her that it was his favorite and that he wanted to keep it. Heather recalled that Mandy had advised him to accept the situation and had warned him never to sweat or wear his work clothes when he sat on the furniture. He brought a kitchen chair when he wanted to watch TV. "I was aware of this, but it was merely Tim's obstinacy. He was attempting to elicit negative feelings from me through passive-aggressive behavior." Mandy asserted that I was aware of his tactics. Heather concurred, inquiring about the method behind my ability to cope. "Even if my father were to abandon us, I would be fine." "Come crawling back," Mandy replied, even as she cringed at her daughter's remark. "I earn enough to support us. We don't need his income." "That's curious, since you kept telling him he needed to make more money." "Now I'm totally confused." "I was just trying to encourage him to be more responsible." She was simultaneously speaking to herself and to Heather. She wanted to be able to be proud of him. "It was probably for the best that you were getting divorced," Heather remarked. "The father does not seem to like you anymore. You are ashamed of him. Remington is acting very interested. Perhaps it is only for the best for all of us. Does living with only one parent affect one's development?" Mandy cautioned her mother to recall that Tim had once been bothered by the absence of a parent. Heather replied with confidence, stating that she had been living with only one parent for a year. She continued, emphasizing that her father was persistent in maintaining contact, attending her sporting events and outdoor activities. Mandy stood silently, contemplating Heather's words. She gazed at her daughter's bedroom door, contemplating her previous remark. It was unfortunate that Tim did not recognize the efforts she made for her family. However, it appeared that his demeanor had also affected Heather. He had consistently portrayed himself as a responsible father to Mandy, who was perceived as less reliable. Both Heather and Tim were aware of this perception. She had a considerable amount of work to attend to, including Heather's games or school events. She was the marketing director for Ferguson Buffers, a position that required her attention. Many people depended on her, including those who were involved in the company picnic. Tim drove 34 miles to a large campground in a rural and wooded area of the state. He made arrangements with the proprietors sought a candidate with a diverse skill set, akin to a Swiss Army knife. His duties encompassed not only the upkeep of the premises and equipment but also the provision of occasional guidance during rafting excursions on the nearby river and hiking tours in the region's mountains. His remuneration was marginally superior to that offered at Ferguson, and he was furnished with a Tim spent the initial 7-day period repairing or tuning motorcycles in the winter cabin. The following week was spent repairing plumbing and electrical systems in the cabins. The subsequent week was dedicated to leading 2 river rafting trips while maintaining the expansive grounds. Throughout this period, Tim had ample time to reflect on his situation. He regretted not seeing Heather as often as he would have liked. He begrudgingly acknowledged to himself that he was lonely. He was surprised at how much he missed his wife. Mandy was still a beautiful woman with a great figure. It was therefore unsurprising that Remington was interested in her. Divorcing Mandy would leave the door open for Remington, but Tim had no control over that. He knew for a fact that he could no longer live with a wife who disrespected him and had practically fallen out of love with him. He was regarded as a liability rather than an asset to the marriage. Unfortunately, Heather would have to grow up in a single-parent family, but Tim was determined to be a positive role model for his daughter. If he continued to put up with the verbal abuse from Mandy, Heather might emulate her mother and become a difficult and disagreeable individual in later life. It was crucial for her to understand that men do not accept. Tim hoped that Heather would learn from their failed marriage to Mandy that she should treat her husband with respect. Working outside during the summer provided Tim with a pleasant distraction. As the weeks went by, he lost weight, became more tanned, and began to resemble his former self. Whenever he saw Heather, she commented on how good he looked. He allowed himself to enjoy this positive feedback. His hair grew out as he no longer felt obliged to cut it short in accordance with Mandy's wishes. He derived satisfaction from his work and had the opportunity to interact with a diverse range of individuals. He was assisting two young women in preparing supplies for a rafting excursion when he observed Mandy's BMW pulling into the campground and stopping next to the pickup truck he was loading. She was providing Heather with transportation for the weekend. With Tim, Heather exited the vehicle and approached him, embracing him in a lengthy hug. "Daddy, you look so tanned and toned. Have you stopped wearing shirts altogether?" she inquired. Tim responded with laughter, embracing his daughter. "Heather, allow me to introduce you to Kim and Lisa. They are guests here, and we are preparing to go river rafting. You are invited to join us," he said. Heather observed the beautiful blondes next to her father. They were dressed in shorts and halter tops, and their tops were filled out. In shorts and halter tops, their tops were filled out. "I'd rather not interfere with your plans," Heather replied, considering how her father must be attracted to the beautiful women he was about to accompany. "That's not a problem," the girl who was introduced as Kim insisted. "We have 2 kayaks and both are designed for 2 people. We also have a pair of tubing kayaks which we'd love to use. Have you joined our group? If not, we can provide you with one of our swimsuits." "Thank you, but I have my own suit." "I appreciate the offer, but I have my own suit. I don't think I could wear a top like yours and keep it on. You both have amazing figures. Don't worry about it. We don't have long to wear tops." Heather replied, teasing her father. "I'm not privy to that information." He did not seem displeased when we removed our tops on the excursion the previous day. "Did we offend you, Tim?" Lisa inquired with a sly grin. "Not at all," he replied, "but Heather will exercise restraint when she swims with us. She is only 15 and it is too early for that. When I turn 18, Heather mocked him. By then, you'll be making most of your own decisions. If you're safe and your pictures aren't all over the internet, it's up to you." Tim replied seriously. "It's her mother who would have something to say about that," Mandy declared, stepping in front of Tim. "I really don't think she should go sailing with those 2 if they are going to be there naked. In fact, you shouldn't either. You must be the wife who elected to change spouses." Kim interrupted her. "Tim is an exemplary gentleman, not to mention he has beautiful eyes. However, we will leave our tops on if it provides you with comfort." Mandy listened to Kim but kept her eyes on Tim. He truly did look magnificent. His long hair bestowed upon him a boyish charm, and his tanned shoulders and chest were indisputable evidence that he was a man. Had he truly transformed that much, or had he always been so attractive? Both women nodded to each other and then proceeded to move to either side of Tim, pressing their breasts against his arms. This action caused their breasts to bulge upwards, visible through the flimsy tops of their clothing. "We will take care of your husband and daughter," Kim promised, pretending not to notice Mandy's stare. "You must be in a hurry. You probably have some important work to discuss with your suave boss," Mandy replied, recalling a previous encounter. Mandy was aware that Tim had informed the women about Edgar, which painted their relationship in an unfavorable light. She was tempted to voice her displeasure, but she restrained herself as she returned to the vehicle and drove to the Ferguson Buffer's office. Mandy reflected on her circumstances. Her own daughter had inquired about her relationship with Edgar on the very day she had been served with the divorce papers. Jensen, from the accounting department, proposed that Mandy might be dating Edgar in an open relationship, given that Tim had filed for divorce. Edgar began acting differently after the company picnic. He was now constantly touching her back and complimenting her appearance, while berating Tim every chance he got. It was assumed by all that she and Edgar were either already together or would be soon. Mandy was impressed by Edgar's success and his ability to navigate the situation. She acknowledged that he was a very attractive man. She acknowledged that Edgar was a physically attractive man, but she had never considered renouncing her marital vows to be with him. She reasoned that while Tim was indeed an underachiever, he had numerous commendable qualities. He was an exemplary father, possessed a handsome appearance, and seemed to be becoming more attractive with age. He consistently treated Mandy's parents and other relatives with respect, never consumed alcohol or illicit substances. Mandy was confident that he and Mandy recalled her father's visible distress when Heather informed her parents of Tim's decision to file for divorce. Heather had explained that Mandy had expressed a desire to purchase a new residence and had insisted that Tim contribute half of the mortgage payments from his salary. Mandy's father demanded an explanation, expressing disbelief and anger. He inquired about the circumstances surrounding the previous 2 mortgages. Years of college and your advanced business degree. He is the epitome of a commendable father. I concur. He is honest, loyal, clean, neat, and has always treated you like a queen. Perhaps that is the crux of the matter. Was he too malleable? Did you lose respect for him because he always let you get your way? Do you have another man in mind? Do you? Mandy's father inquired suspiciously. Mandy shook her head in the negative. Heather's father immediately turned his attention to her. What did you see or hear, Heather? Your mother was overly impressed with the gentleman who is now the proprietor of Ferguson Buffers. She frequently discussed his intelligence and good looks. He calls your mother frequently and they engage in lengthy conversations. Now that Heather has brought this up, I have noticed that you seem to be quite taken with this man. You mentioned him on several occasions at our 4th of July meeting, Mandy. Her mother, in a tone of concern, inquired whether she had been unfaithful. Mandy replied that she had never been unfaithful to her husband, Tim, and that she had never intended to be. She simply wished that he would be more responsible and work harder to support his family. Her father responded that she had not stopped loving Tim and that he was the one who had filed for divorce after she drove him to it. He was not an adequate partner. How much money is required? I am aware that you receive a substantial salary. That is not the issue. Mandy asserted that he must desire Heather and me to be proud of him. He is content to be a maintenance man. How do you think Heather and I feel when people inquire about Tim's profession? Heather interjected with enthusiasm. I am proud of my father. All of my friends consider him the best father in the world. They all like him. He always attends all. Mandy's daughter was visibly distressed by the implication that her father was capable of achieving more. She was keen to emphasize that he was intelligent, strong, attractive and pleasant to be around, and that he could potentially achieve great things if he were to put in the effort. Mandy's father concurred, nodding his head in agreement and stating that he found his son to be similarly impressive. He suggested that Mandy's reluctance to pursue a relationship with her husband was a missed opportunity to find a partner who would complement her well. Tim is undoubtedly one of the most attractive and admirable husbands. It is likely that there are numerous women who would be content with his appearance and character. Grandpa, you should observe how other girls' mothers behave in the presence of their fathers. Since learning of the divorce between Heather and her mother, single mothers have become notably cordial. Heather recalls that she is the primary figure in her family, yet everyone assumes that Tim is attractive. Mandy expressed discontent, stating that he would not be so appealing to everyone if we had Tim earns more than I do, yet we still live in a modest home and eat inexpensive food. We have raised 3 children and managed to maintain a stable household despite financial challenges. My wife's father noted that I am fortunate to have a vehicle and access to new clothing, whereas my wife had to make do with less. She supported me through difficult times and remained loyal even when I made mistakes that negatively impacted our finances. I consider myself extremely fortunate to have a wife who was willing to marry me. Marry me. I am not a mother. I desire more than merely settling for the minimum. I aspire to a husband whom I can be proud of. Mandy replied, marveling at the depth of her parents' love at the campground. Upon Mandy's departure, Lisa and Kim released Tim's hands and began laughing heartily. Heather regarded them with confusion. Lisa and I are in a serious relationship, Kim explained. Heather stated that she had gone sailing with her father the previous day and that he had never previously seen their daughters unless he had been peeking through their window the night before. Sheck did not act like a woman who wanted a divorce. Lisa stated that her mother was an attractive woman, but that she was unsure of her mother's intentions. Tim was a great guy. Buffers for Saturday's meeting. Mandy was surprised to see only one car in the parking lot. It was Edgar's car. Where is everyone? Mandy asked as she entered the meeting room. I have traveled to this location on a Saturday morning for a meeting that was previously scheduled to take place yesterday. I have obligations to attend to at my residence. You informed me that your daughter would be spending the weekend with her father, who is not currently involved in her life. I believe that this was an optimal time for us to convene. Remington reasoned, placing his hand on Mandy's back and continuing to gently rub her shoulders. I have scheduled us for a conference in Chicago in 2 weeks. Remington continued, I believe we could reduce the company's expenditure by renting just one room. The conference would take place on Saturday morning, but we could leave Friday afternoon and return Monday morning. This would allow us to enjoy a romantic work weekend. Edgar, this is all so sudden. I require time to consider this proposal. Mandy replied, struggling to think of an appropriate response. It is over, but I intend to spend this weekend with you in Chicago. I am confident that you will enjoy yourself. I am aware of how to provide a lady with an enjoyable experience if you understand my meaning. Mandy was visibly distressed as she drove home, as her life was rapidly unraveling. Tim felt that he had been treated with disdain and disrespect, which led him to initiate divorce proceedings. Heather was remiss in her response to the dissolution of their marriage, as she implied that she had only had one parent for a limited period, which suggested that Mandy was not a particularly she was a good mother, but her parents were resentful of her attitude toward Tim. Everyone thought Tim was a good guy and a great husband. Edgar had just announced his intentions to sleep with her during a business trip scheduled in 2 weeks. It turns out Tim was right about him. He told her to keep Remington at a distance because he wanted to get in her panties. Tim was having a lot of fun. He accompanied two in a river rafting trip. The women were incredibly sexy, removing their tops to display their large breasts in front of him. He could even engage in sexual intercourse with both of them simultaneously, which made Mandy feel physically ill. If Tim could move on so quickly, she wondered, why could she not enjoy an affair with Edgar in Chicago? He was handsome and very successful, and he was the kind of man she had always dreamed of marrying. Mandy had previously envisioned Remington as a husband, but she began to worry about what Heather would think when she found out her mother was involved with him, especially after all her denials. Since Tim decided he'd rather get a divorce than be married to Mandy and live on her terms, things have become more complicated. Why couldn't he just make more money and support his family better? Andy recalled Heather's inquiries regarding Mandy's expectations of Tim's work ethic, given that Heather was capable of supporting her family financially. Mandy's own father had commended Tim as a devoted husband and exemplary father. However, Mandy was initially unaware of the high regard her family held for Tim. They appeared unconcerned about his employment at the same company where Mandy held the position of marketing director. It was evident that the situation was becoming increasingly awkward. On Sunday night, Tim brought Heather home. She walked through the door, smiling and clearly pleased with her weekend. Seeing her daughter so happy, Mandy experienced a renewed bout of depression. It was perplexing why a daughter who adored her father could elicit such negative emotions. Shouldn't Mandy be happy about their relationship? Was her father rushing things by attempting to rekindle his relationship with Heather? It would be beneficial for girlfriends to stop by for a few minutes. It would be advantageous for him to communicate with me on a regular basis. Mandy expressed her frustration, stating that we have a daughter in common. Heather sensed her mother's emotional state and decided to hold her hand. Perhaps she would begin to recognize Tim's true appearance. My father was impressed with Lisa and Kim. I am aware that he did not engage in sexual intercourse with them last night because my bedroom door was open. Given that the bedroom door was open, it is unlikely that he would have been able to enter and exit the cabin without being heard. It is implausible that Kim and Lisa would have been the quiet and peaceful ones in bed, given their reputations for making noise during sexual intercourse. Mandy responded indignantly, stating that she had not made any noises that could be heard. Heather recalled that, in the past year or so, Mandy had wailed and moaned quite loudly. I did not object. I considered it commendable that my parents were so fond of each other. However, I am sorry if our presence caused you any inconvenience. Mandy expressed her regret. I was unaware that you could hear us. My mother was not bothered by our presence at all. In fact, she was quite pleased that my parents loved each other so much. Her parents are divorced. Lisa and Kim were quite enjoyable company. I found them quite agreeable. They treated me as though I were their younger sister, and we formed a strong bond. Heather admitted with a smile that they were a source of great companionship. Mandy inquired whether they had kept their tops on. Heather replied that they had been covered when they docked, noting that the area was quite isolated and that no one had seen them topless. The situation became increasingly complex for Mandy over the course of the following workweek. On Monday afternoon, one of the most profitable and productive machines on the production line ceased to function correctly. Despite remaining operational, the quality of the product it was producing was significantly below the required standard. Agnes Ferguson consistently attended the Wednesday afternoon management meeting and proceeded to be continued. Day operations were transferred to Remington, but the latter was unable to accommodate the family business, which continued to flourish. Acumen kept a close eye on the company's production and profits after the maintenance supervisor made his report. Agnes began asking pointed questions, inquiring about the reasons for the prolonged downtime of number 27. Steve, the machine in question, is one of our most productive, and machines that were previously profitable are now experiencing difficulties. It is challenging to identify the precise nature of the issue. The machine is operational, yet the quality of the output does not meet the required standards. 2 individuals have been working on the problem since Monday. The technician inquired if this was a new occurrence, noting that it had not been seen previously. She continued her original question, is this something new? Is it a phenomenon that has never been observed before? The service technician replied, I believe I may have overlooked something in your explanation. Steve, unless this is a phenomenon that has never been observed before, why is it taking so long to fix it this time? The situation has changed, he replied. The technicians are experiencing difficulty in determining the cause of the malfunction. Steve Snark inquired as to what changes have occurred that have prevented the machine from returning to its optimal functioning state. The owner, exhibiting impatience, then asked whether Tim Ison, who was previously intimately familiar with the machine and would spend an hour or two making adjustments, was still available. It would run like new for months, Steve admitted, though with some reluctance. I see, Agnes said, looking at each person in the room. She then observed that this year, the management had given themselves several bonuses for improved production and profits. She inquired as to whether any of the employees on the floor had received bonuses. After all, they are the ones who actually the company holds employee appreciation days when monthly goals are met or exceeded. Remington stated that pizza or even a barbecue is delivered to the lunchroom, which is greatly appreciated by the employees. Those in maintenance and production receive a slice of pizza or ribs for meeting or exceeding company goals. Does management receive similar generosity? Agnes inquired about the possibility of Tim expressing gratitude for the bonus pizza. She inquired gently, did Tim ever discuss how he valued the bonus pizza? You know, Tim, this was another reason he was reluctant to take overtime. He expressed discontent over receiving a slice of pizza while the office was receiving bonuses. He indicated that the pizza was an incentive for him to avoid working overtime. He was quick to point out that Ferguson Buffers does not require or desire poorly performing employees. Mr. Remington, Tim Larson was precisely the kind of employee this company needed and wanted. He was reliable and highly capable. My husband often observed that Tim was able to accomplish more in an 8-hour shift than many other individuals he had hired. It was a grave error in judgment to underestimate Tim Larson's value to the company. He was arguably the most valuable employee the company had. Mandy was astonished and amazed at how highly Ferguson valued Tim. It appeared that Bill Ferguson held Tim in higher regard than Mandy could have imagined. Had Tim somehow deceived his parents, Heather, and the majority of the Ferguson Buffer employees, it would have been the only plausible explanation. He pointed out that it was Mandy who was the unintelligent woman. Could you ask Tim to call me? Mandy Agnes Ferguson inquired gently. He must have changed his number. I am unable to get through to him, of course. Mrs. Ferguson replied. Mandy was surprised. He has a new phone, but my daughter has his number. I will ask her to ask him to call you. Thank you, my dear Agnes Ferguson replied kindly and looked at Edgar Remington. I am sorry for your marital failings. I am afraid our company I must respectfully disagree with your assertion that I have contributed to the situation in any way, Mrs. Ferguson. In fact, I would venture to say that the majority of our problems are a result of Tim and my actions alone. Mandy assured her, pondering what Agnes Ferguson was implying. The form was duly completed, signed, and submitted to the HR department before the commencement of the aforementioned picnic. Agnes expressed her gratitude for your foresight in this matter. Had it been necessary, I would have intervened, but your forward planning obviated the need for such action. I am compelled to request your assistance if it is within your capabilities. I am seeking a consultant to address some issues within our company. We are experiencing difficulties with a few vehicles, and it has been conveyed to me that I am the optimal candidate to rectify the issues. However, I am unable to be employed by you, but I will be present tomorrow for a couple of hours to ascertain how I can be of assistance. Tim replied cordially, "Thank you so much." For several weeks, Tim had been eager to ascertain Heather's well-being. While Heather had provided him with as much information as possible, Tim was aware that he would likely discern nuances in Mandy's body language and verbal cues that Heather might overlook. Tim then made a request, stating, "I have a request. Could you kindly ask Mandy to extend an invitation to me for the work she has requested of me? Do not inform her that I have already agreed. Instead, simply convey that you have considered the matter and decided that the request is appropriate. Tim, it would be more beneficial if she requested it directly. Tim, I am unwilling to engage in any scheme for revenge or retribution. I am sorry you are in this situation, but I will not set Mandy up and make you suffer in any way." Agnes Ferguson stated, "That's why I respect you so much." Tim replied, "The reality is rather disappointing. I really miss her. I haven't spoken more than a few words to her since your company picnic." Agnes said sympathetically, "I'll ask her to call. Please do not distress her when we conclude our conversation. I believe she is becoming more perceptive." 2 minutes later, Tim's phone rang. He allowed it to ring a few times before answering. Tim proceeded to extol the virtues of Mandy's culinary abilities, noting that she was one of the most talented cooks he had ever encountered. Mandy, visibly disconcerted, inquired about the nature of the culinary delights Tim had been enjoying. Tim, in a somewhat self-deprecating manner, admitted that he had been missing Mandy's cooking. He then proceeded to enumerate a few other aspects of their relationship that had not been working out. Tim then turned the conversation to more practical matters, inquiring about Mandy's financial situation. He expressed his belief that she was doing as well as could be expected, given the circumstances. Mandy, visibly distressed, revealed that she had been served divorce papers in front of her entire work staff. "I am attempting to cope with this situation." Mandy revealed that she realized the prank may have been extreme and apologized for it. She explained that she was angry and wanted to hurt Tim in return. She acknowledged that it was not her finest moment and expressed guilt over her actions. She stated that Tim deserved better. Tim concluded by saying that he would have been happier if Mandy had not done it. If the situation had arisen at home, would it have been preferable to discuss the issues between us? Was I so unbearable that you considered divorce to be the only solution? Mandy inquired whether it would have been possible to discuss the matter with me. Did you solicit my input regarding the purchase of a new house or my feelings about paying half the mortgage? Did you consider my concerns regarding the number of hours you work and the amount of time you spend with Remington? Tim inquired. I do not recall a willingness on your part to engage in meaningful dialogue. I did, in fact, listen to your perspective. Tim, I perceived a reluctance to assume responsibility for the well-being of your family. You possess considerable potential, yet you have chosen to fulfill a role that is largely reactive. Mandy elaborated, you have succinctly articulated the reason behind our divorce. Tim acknowledged, I previously shared with you how my father was absent from my academic events due to his work commitments. Subsequently, he suffered a significant cardiac event and passed away at the age of 39. He failed to achieve any meaningful result, and his efforts were ultimately futile. I had resolved to avoid repeating his mistakes. I had previously informed you of these considerations before we were married. Tim, I had assumed that I had a clear understanding of your perspective, but I now realize that I was mistaken. I am attempting to ascertain your feelings about the matter, but when I was served with the divorce papers and observed you with those 2 women, my outlook did not improve. Mandy replied, welcome to my world. Tim replied, with a hint of sarcasm, you have consistently praised Edgar Remington since he joined the company. You then announced that we would be moving to a larger residence. Furthermore, I was not consulted regarding the decision to take on a new mortgage, despite the significant financial implications. It is evident that my opinion was not sought on this matter, yet Remington was consulted. I will not accept such a lack of consideration from my wife, particularly from Remington. I worked for Ferguson, but they did not possess the authority to issue commands to me outside of their designated roles. I never attempted to assert that the income one generated during your academic pursuits was solely mine. It is imperative to recognize that the income generated by either of us is ours collectively, and I did not contribute to it. This discrepancy represents a significant divergence in our perspectives. I take pride in your achievements, and I have always been proud of you. However, I have never perceived a sense of competition between us. I have consistently maintained that our income is a shared resource belonging to both of us. You are entitled to enjoy your work, and I respect that. My free time, especially the time I spend with Heather, was previously a source of enjoyment, however, that has now ceased. I concede that Edgar's behavior at the party was excessive, and Mandy reluctantly concurred. I am coming to recognize that I made a significant error in judgment when I was contemplating purchasing a new house. You have consistently aligned with my preferences, leading me to assume this would continue to be the case. However, I have come to realize that purchasing a house is not a decision that can be made without significant input from both parties. Mandy, I have often concurred with your opinions on matters that did not hold significant weight for me. However, you have consistently exhibited a tendency to overreact. As a result, I have ceased requesting your absence from work. Furthermore, I ceased requesting your company at Heather's sporting events. I similarly ceased suggesting trips to fishing spots, golf courses, or camping sites. It became evident that your professional pursuits had become your primary focus. I thus concluded that if these activities brought you joy and were of significant importance to you, I should not impede your progress. However, you did not extend the same consideration to me. You frequently expressed discontent with my employment and income. I had initially hoped that you would adopt a more similar approach to me, but I came to understand that this was not a priority for you. You expected me to emulate your own work ethic and that of your father, which entailed extended working hours. We were already earning a considerable income, and I was not inclined to work longer hours for the sole purpose of attaining a similar income level. I am not prepared to relinquish what I consider to be important aspects of my life in order to satisfy your desires, particularly given your tendency to be dissatisfied with the status quo. Tim added, I must admit, Tim, that I was not aware that I was so disagreeable. I genuinely believed that this was the optimal course of action for our family. I did not experience any personal attraction to Edgar other than admiration for his leadership abilities. One might be forgiven for assuming that I would never be unfaithful to you. However, I appear to have misinterpreted the situation, as I believed that you were interested in him. Some individuals at Ferguson inquired as to how I could even be in the same building as Remington, given his reputation. He began to investigate my wife, but I dismissed his suspicions and reassured everyone that I had complete faith in my wife. However, over time, my confidence in her began to waver. Tim then revealed that he had another concern: Remington is seriously letting Ferguson down. He doesn't plan ahead. He's wasting resources. In the long term, it is possible that he plans to leave for a more lucrative position elsewhere in a few months' time, once he has improved his CV. While the results look promising now, there will undoubtedly be a price to pay for everything in a year or less. Ferguson's customers will have a hard time fulfilling orders and retaining them, and quality is declining. Morale is pretty low. It seems that your hero is in a difficult position and would like to leave before things get any worse. He departs for pasture new. In response to your impolite remark, Mandy replied angrily, "Hek is a wonderful man and is doing a great job. Our production numbers have increased each month since he arrived. You may wish to continue believing this, but it is not the case. At least until he succeeds, you should continue to believe this. I hope my pension will not be adversely affected when he is company and you," Tim said. Tim, this discussion is unproductive. I called because Agnes Ferguson requested my assistance. She would appreciate it if you could examine one of the production machines. The repairmen have been unable to resolve the issue. It is unwise to argue before requesting a favor. I will assist Agnes, but I will not assist you. Tim replied, "I understand. The success of the company is of great importance to you. I shall come tomorrow morning. I am playing tennis with Heather tomorrow afternoon, so I shall take my leave at 3. I had not previously considered myself to have any affinity for tennis, but I have discovered that I do indeed enjoy it. Mandy replied, smiling as she pictured Tim playing tennis. Heather appeared to be in good physical condition when I dropped her off the other day. It seems that your efforts are paying off. You also appeared to be in good shape. Tim concurred, noting that Heather's breasts appeared larger than usual. He inquired as to whether you had undergone a breast augmentation. I am surprised that you even noticed my breasts after seeing those two attractive blondes. I have lost weight, predominantly in the abdominal region, which has resulted in an increase in the size of my breasts. I have not had a significant appetite recently. Mandy admitted, do not lose the weight again. Tim advised, you really do look beautiful now. I appreciate you noticing and being thoughtful enough to mention it. I will see you tomorrow on the Agnes expressed her gratitude for the assistance provided by Tim. She was pleased to hear the news and requested that he relay this information to her. Tim agreed and ended the call. The following morning, Tim returned to his usual spot on the floor at Ferguson's. He was discussing the matter with Agnes and informed her that he had resolved the issue. Problems with the 27 car? Ferguson inquired, her voice laced with curiosity. You were accompanied by these individuals during the initial setup of the machine, yet they still seem to be uncertain about its optimal functionality. Tim, who was standing alongside Ferguson, observed the 27 running smoothly and listened to its purring sound. It's truly remarkable, he commented. I must admit, though, that I'm not quite sure how to explain or teach. Tim replied, I listen and observe the machine making adjustments until it sounds and looks right. They need to learn to listen to what the machine is telling them. This seems to be the stumbling block for most repairmen. You were able to fix the problem in less than 2 hours. We've had it for days with no results. Agnes stated, we truly miss your presence here at Ferguson. It has always been a highly regarded workplace and you and Bill have consistently treated me with respect. I am aware that your refusal to work overtime on numerous occasions has caused Bill some frustration. However, I must live with the consequences of my actions. Witnessing my father's dedication to his profession throughout his lifetime has instilled in me a profound respect for hard work and commitment. I hold you in high regard for your ability to prioritize and adhere to your principles. Agnes replied that she admired Tim's ability to set priorities and adhere to them. She noted that he had consistently demonstrated a strong work ethic, never exploiting Bill's friendship. If they had sons, she would want them to emulate Tim's qualities. Agnes then decided to visit Mandy in her office. Despite her initial annoyance, she managed to conceal her feelings. Remington is situated at the corner of Mandy's desk. Tim has implemented several modifications to the 27, resulting in enhanced functionality. Agnes commended his efforts, noting that he was able to restore the device to operational status in less than 2 hours, despite previous difficulties. Instead of attempting a repair, he informed me that he had only come because you requested his assistance. It was unfortunate that Tim quit and left Mandy unsupported when she requested that he carry his share of the load home. Tim informed Agnes that he was only there because she had asked him to come, despite having already promised Agnes that he would stop by. Agnes agreed to this arrangement because she believed that Tim still loved his wife. She would have been willing to assist in resolving the issue, but Remington's remark struck her as petty and demeaning. She had been monitoring the man more closely since Tim had expressed his opinion at the company picnic. As it turned out, Tim's assessment was quite accurate. Your interest in Larson's personal life is unprofessional. Such behavior borders on harassment and is inappropriate. I find your comments about Mandy's husband to be derogatory and unprofessional. I am perplexed by your choice of words. Do not make a similar remark in my presence again. Agnes stated, before leaving the room, that she had touched a nerve. Remington commented, she favors that individual and she is the superior. I should return to my duties as soon as Edgar departed from her office. Mandy reflected on how Agnes Ferguson had defended Tim and she had remained silent. Why had the proprietor of the company been so swift to defend Tim while his own wife had passively permitted herself to be disrespected? There was a time when she would have been quick to challenge anyone who had the audacity to humiliate Tim. Remington was a constant source of criticism and she not only accepted it but also acquiesced to it. The possibility that Tim had reason to be upset crossed her mind, and not for the first time. The following Wednesday at the managers' meeting, tensions began to rise. Steve, the maintenance supervisor, reported that the 27 is operational and performing well. There has been an increase in minor issues with other production machines, but his staff has been able to minimize downtime. Edgar Remington then spoke. He stated that he and Mandy would be attending a conference in Chicago that weekend. He believes it will be beneficial for reducing costs and expanding sales. Remington apologized, stating that he had previously informed him that he would not be attending the conference. Mandy interrupted, stating that she already had plans for the weekend. Remington then asked, "I thought I explained that I would not be attending." "I must say, it is a most fortuitous opportunity and one that may never present itself again. I can assure you that I am not interested in the opportunity you described to me in such glowing terms." "Indeed," Mandy replied, "I would have thought that our company's marketing director would be more interested in improving our bottom line. However, I am capable of handling that task myself. In fact, I am very concerned about our company's financial performance. I would like to inquire about a few matters with Steve if I may." Mandy then addressed her question to Agnes Ferguson after her nod. Mandy proceeded to inquire about the maintenance schedule for our vehicles. "Has there been any scheduled maintenance on our vehicles over the preceding months? Have you been following the established schedule for the machines on the floor?" "Not entirely," Steve replied, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness. "We have omitted a few since everything was functioning so well and there were no issues. By not halting the machine for a shift each month, we have increased production, which is our primary objective. If maintenance is not a priority, why have a schedule at all?" Agnes inquired. "Tim Larson convinced your husband to adopt this procedure years ago, and we have consistently followed it. I was instructed to skip every other scheduled maintenance stop to increase productivity," Steve replied. "That approach proved effective as well." Remington interjected, "Let's examine the data. It's clear what the outcome will be." Steve did not provide the number 14, which had ceased functioning the previous afternoon. Mandy persisted, inquiring about the cause of the malfunction and the expected duration of the machine's unavailability. By the time the operator became aware of the issue, the roller had already malfunctioned. "We promptly ordered a replacement, which is expected to arrive within a week. Our team should be able to install and reassemble the machine in a single shift." Steve's assessment was met with a nod of approval from Agnes Ferguson. "Mandy, Steve, you will revert to the maintenance schedule that my husband and Tim developed and you will adhere to it strictly. Do you understand?" Not long after the meeting ended, Edgar Remington burst into Mandy's office and slammed the door shut. "What was the rationale behind that decision today? You never informed me of it. I was not going to Chicago this weekend. That maintenance schedule made me appear to be incompetent." "Mr. Remington, I was indeed incompetent, but I am improving. I hope it is not too late." "Get out of my office," demanded Mandy. "You are foolish," Remington scolded. "I am the boss. Clean up your desk. And get the hell out. You're fired." Remington was taken aback to see Mandy smile at him before returning to her seat and speaking into the intercom, which appeared to have already been activated. "Please call security to my office, Becky." Mandy's words were barely out of her mouth when the door to her office swung open. Agnes Ferguson entered the room, accompanied by two men. "Mr. Remington, I must inform you that your services are no longer required here. Please collect any personal items you may have on your desk and report to Human Resources, where they will be waiting for you. These gentlemen will ensure that you comply with my instructions. You are being fired. I have increased production. This place is more profitable than ever," Remington exclaimed incredulously. "In the short term, you may be right, but you are damaging the morale of the company and sacrificing future production for quick profits. This is not sound business practice. Furthermore, I do not have a favorable opinion of you. Please leave." Subsequently, as soon as Remington was led out of the office, Agnes expressed her gratitude to Mandy. She acknowledged the importance of Remington's contributions to the meeting and expressed her appreciation for Mandy's efforts in identifying additional concerns related to workplace harassment. After the meeting, it became evident that Remington had been observing Mandy's behavior with a particular interest. However, Agnes had not anticipated that he would take such a direct approach. Failing to maintain the facilities is tantamount to a death sentence for a manufacturing company. Agnes added that he had to go. Do you think Tim would consider coming back to work here? Mandy admitted that she had been preoccupied with the idea that he had to change so that she could be proud of him. I had to alter my perception of him so that I could be proud of him, despite already being proud of him. I will attempt to persuade him to halt the divorce proceedings this weekend. I am unsure if he will be able to do so on Saturday morning. Tim was loading his pickup truck for the trip to the float plane when Mandy pulled into Heather, the daughter, embraced her father and nodded to her mother, who was standing at a distance. Mandy inquired, "Could we converse? I have a few matters I'd like to discuss, but I'm currently preoccupied. I'm accompanying someone on a floating excursion. She'll be here shortly, so I'm unable to. Are you prepared? I'm afraid that we'll have to wait. Heather, please gather your belongings. You will be joining me. This time, there will only be 3 of us." Tim interjected, "No, Heather, it will just be the 2 of you." Heather replied, "I will remain in the pool. Do not concern yourself with me. I am the customer." Tim and Mandy confirmed that the payment was complete. Heather asserts that she will be fine in the pool. It was nearly dark when Heather heard the laughter of her parents entering the cabin. She hastened to the front room to ascertain their well-being but paused when she overheard their conversation. It is noteworthy that Mandy was unaware of the potential for her actions to be observed by others. Despite the presence of a boat launching area and a considerable number of individuals on the riverbank, she chose to float down a bend in the river without any form of covering. This decision was likely influenced by Heather's insistence that she remove her bikini top. Tim replied that he was unaware Heather still wore a bikini top. He continued, "You appeared quite attractive when you smiled and waved at the men standing nearby, who appeared to be visibly affected by your presence." He then asked how the 2 blonde women managed to conceal their breasts. Mandy inquired as to whether they would be seen by every male within a 100-mile radius. Mandy observed that the river appeared to be relatively deserted. Tim responded with a smirk, indicating that the lack of visibility of their breasts was due to their own actions. He further suggested that the river was not as deserted as they had assumed. Heather interjected, inquiring about Tim's whereabouts. Mandy responded that she had been resting. Heather then made an assumption about her mother's actions, suggesting that she had paddled down the river in a canoe with her breasts exposed. The incident was witnessed by a considerable number of individuals, which is a source of considerable embarrassment for me. What will be the reaction of my friends when I return to school and they learn of my mother's public display of her breasts? How could you do that to me, Mom? Mandy asked, her voice strained. You were the one who told me that, she added, her eyes fixed on the ground. The 2 women, both blonde and of a substantial breast size, were observed topless in a river location in the vicinity of Tim. Mandy demanded an explanation from the young lady, stating that she had previously informed her that no one had witnessed them topless. Furthermore, she asserted that the location was particularly isolated. Heather replied with a she smiled, and this was indeed the truth. Why had she not informed him of her uncontrollable urge to display her breasts to her father? What had she been thinking? She hoped that she would respect her father enough to realize that he needed more than her bare breasts to make him forget all the bad things she had said to him. Correct, Dad. I am unsure what you are referring to, Tim replied, his expression perplexed. I do not recall any specific details except for going down the river. Oh, Dad. Are you so superficial and easily influenced by your mother's physical attributes that you are unable to think for yourself? Heather teased. No, my mind is. Tim began, but was interrupted. At last, clarity emerged. I believe the following is true, Tim began, holding out the money to Heather. You should purchase a hamburger and fries at the establishment situated across the highway. Furthermore, your mother and I require rest and should retire early the following morning. Heather was seated at the kitchen table. Upon exiting Tim's bedroom, clad in one of his shirts, Mandy paused when she observed her daughter regarding her. Mandy proceeded to explain that she had made a slight noise, emphasizing that there was nothing she could do to rectify the situation. She further stated that the shirt belonged to Tim. Mommy, Heather exclaimed, throwing herself into her mother's arms. Does this mean you and Daddy are back together? It means that we will be if we work on keeping our promises. I won't tell your dad about his job or that we need a bigger house anymore. I will work on showing him how proud I am of him. He will make an effort to dress well and accompany me to corporate events and social gatherings looking absolutely beautiful so that everyone will envy me. We will spend more time together and with you. I was wrong to be so stubborn about so many things, Tim. He added, wearing a suit and tie on occasion will elicit pride from your mother. She will be proud to be seen with me. I will do it, I have no regrets. That is an excessive amount of information, Heather exclaimed. I was forced to endure her nocturnal meowing and yelping. I believe it is possible that the experience has left you with a permanent psychological injury. You may wish to consider ways of coping with this, such as wearing earplugs. I intend to return to my previous role and request a pay rise. Your mother appears to believe that I will be granted one, and it seems probable that her vocalizations will persist or even intensify.